Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Lorraine and my nickname is Rainey, and you can call me Rainey. I have finally finished that winter landscape that I started a couple of videos ago, and I wanted to do a quick recap and explain a little bit of the process, so you don't necessarily have to go back unless you want to. With my watercolors, I will typically use an Arches 140-pound cold press paper. I have found over the years that's the most reliable paper for me, and I have a better chance of getting good results if I use it. And what I do is I'll buy a large sheet and tear it down and then tape it to a rigid piece of plexiglass or some other rigid board. And I will start most paintings with a light sketch of my subject. I use a 2H pencil with a very light hand. And when you're finished, you don't have to erase the lines. You will be painting darker, and so they will disappear into the painting. I started here with a light wash. I used water initially with a slight tint to it in the sky, and then I'm laying in some of the color. The color that I used is cobalt mixed with a little bit of cerulean, and I'm not covering the whole thing. It's a variegated wash. It's a wash that's light and dark. I wanted to give the illusion of some clouds, and so I started off with that wet wash, and you can still see that it's still shiny. As long as that wash is shiny, you can add more pigment with water. Now, once you start to lose the shine, you're going to get a different effect if you continue to add paint. So there is a timing issue when it comes to doing a wet wash like that. And after you've done a few, you'll discover through trial and error, like I did, when to stop. It was still shiny. I wanted it a little darker. Watercolor typically dries significantly darker, so I wanted to pop it with a little bit more color. Here's a photo. You'll notice from the very first photo that I ended up cropping the whole thing, and I lopped off the left side. I eliminated the power lines. In retrospect, I wish I had left them, and I probably will do this as an oil painting, and I've learned a lot from doing this, and so I'll take that to the oil painting when I do start to paint it. And so what I'm trying to do here now is I'm laying in those distant trees, that tree line around the house, around the barns. I have painted it using a mixture of ultramarine, burnt sienna, and alizarin crimson. It comes a little purple. You'll notice the reference photo is quite gray. If you want to just do a gray trees in the background, you're just going to want to do, you can use Payne's gray, or you can mix your own gray, which is what I will typically do. And so I would mix my ultramarine with burnt sienna or some other orange and give myself a nice gray. What I did with this painting is it was a little too purple for my taste, so a little later on I went over with a very light wash of just a gray to push back that purple. And so you can see here what I was talking about before. I laid in the paper is beginning to dry from that initial wet wash, and as it begins to dry, you can see that those trees, that tree line is not popping and spreading with great abandon because the paper is not saturated with water. It's beginning to dry, and so when it begins to dry, you get different effects. And this at this stage, when I'm laying in my paint, it's a perfect way to use watercolor to its best advantage. There are properties to watercolor that I love the way it pops and spreads. Sometimes it can get out of control, but sometimes, as in here, you can control it a bit. As best we can, I should say. So I'm continuing to work around the barns in the house, those are dry. That's dry paper. So you can see that I have a fair amount of control painting wet paint and pigment around those barns and houses that are dry. So this is where you end up with some control. Here again, the silos, those are dry, and I'm laying in that tree line behind. This is more wet paint and pigment on dry paper. And you see on the left-hand side, there's a lot of trees in the front of the house towards the road. And I'm pondering how I'm going to handle that as I'm painting this. So you'll see that I'm still dancing using that wet paper. And here we are. I'm like, okay, I want to lay in some of those tree trunks without going completely down, and I want some of the snow to show through. So I'm just making little lines, placeholders that I will work later on in the painting. I work slowly. I have sped this video up a touch, so it's probably sped up by 4 times. So the process is slow. I would encourage you to take your time. I have a tendency to rush through my work, start painting before the paper is at a place in the drying process where I can get the best effects, and I'll push it and then I'll regret it. So I would say take it slow and be patient. And the other thing I would say is you're going to I always reach a place in my painting where I'm like, oh brother, that's not what I wanted. Your painting is going to it's going to evolve. There will be a place where you're not going to be very happy with it, I would suspect. But if you keep pushing and you push past, you will, first of all, finishing is a success in and of itself. And the other thing I would say is that you will surprise yourself and be very happy with the results. At least, some of it, I mean, there's always something in a painting that I'm like, I know I struggled with that. And this is one of those. I wasn't 100% happy with the color of the snow shadows. Now watching the video, I should have just left it alone. So I kept looking back at the photo. I began to be a slave to the photo, and it looked to me like the shadows in the snow were more gray. And so I went over it, and it was so fresh when it was at this stage. And I should have just left it, and I didn't. So what I say about that is lesson learned. Lesson learned. So I'll take that lesson to the next painting and hopefully not make that same mistake again. No guarantees on that one, of course. You'll notice that I cropped the road off, and I'm not sure, some of the things that I edited out, I wish I had kept, but I know with watercolor sometimes there's not a lot of flexibility. I think those power lines could have really made great emphasis on drawing you back. I would have liked to have put one of the cars in. Those things I will do when I do this one again. And but for now, I simplified it, and I was ultimately happy with the result. A few things were a problem for me. You see that little truck that I painted back there? I'm not good at painting automobiles, so that's something I need to practice. And so I have that in right there, and I ended up blotting it out later and trying to get a better shape. And oh my goodness, I struggled with that little truck shape. But at the end of the day, I kind of put it behind some bushes as a way to save it. And it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, I don't think. So here I'm laying in the shadows for the house, and I want to push it back. It is in shadow. Their light is coming from the left. The light hits the top of the barn. There's snow on the barn and the house. And so I saved just a little sliver of snow. Now, I painted around it. That's the white of the paper. If you end up losing it and you don't save as much as you hope, you can always go back and use a bleed-proof white or a gouache white, which is an opaque white, to kind of retrieve some of those lights if you lose them. But I always try at first to save the whites, and because your painting will be just a little bit fresher if it's the white of the paper. That, by the way, is an opinion, my opinion, and you can take that all with a grain of salt. And you can see the shadows aren't as fresh, lesson learned. And now I'm trying to figure out the grass patterns. Now there's a large area of snow in the foreground, and I did not do a value sketch or a color study before I started. And so I knew I was going to put grasses in, but what you're trying to do here is you're trying to create a pattern of grasses that are interesting. So this is, you're being a shape maker. So if you can separate yourself from the fact that you're painting a whole bunch of little grasses that are poking through the snow, and just try to make interesting shapes that will guide your viewer into your painting. I have found that thought process helpful. So I'll be thinking about, is that an interesting shape? Is that are the shadows in the grasses effective? Are they too dark in one area or not? So, you know, I'm just making shapes that say that they are grass in the snow. And if you make a shape and it says to you that it's a grass in the snow, you know what that is? That's a success. So I went about trying to lay in those shapes. I ultimately darkened the road and painted the yellow lines, and you'll see I'll have a little photo album coming up that will show you the progress of this piece. It is finally finished. There's the initial sketch, the initial washes, and those are fresh and clean, and then I start to second guess myself, and it's interesting as you to take pictures of your work as you go. I wanted to emphasize here, if you look close up, it looks pretty messy, but when you step back, it says grass, bushes, trees, and so there we have it. We're nearly done. A little close up, the truck behind the bush, and we are finished. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. This painting will be available for sale on Etsy. I don't have it matted yet, but if you're interested, you can always email in advance. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You have a wonderful day.